I still remember the exact moment my hand stopped shaking long enough to sign that final page. A $200 million deal, months of endless flights, late-night strategy calls, and charm turned into a single blue signature on crisp white paper. The conference room was buzzing with that artificial energy only a corporate win can bring: fake smiles, firm handshakes, and the kind of champagne someone had definitely pulled from the back of a supply closet. The client, a powerful CEO with a reputation for cutting through nonsense, looked me in the eye and said, "You pulled this off. Not your team, not your company, you." I smiled politely, but inside my chest swelled with the kind of pride I hadn't felt in years. For once, all the politics, the dismissive comments, the credit stealing, it didn't matter. I had delivered the biggest deal in the company's history, and no one could take that away from me. Or so I thought. See, corporate life teaches you one hard truth: success doesn't always equal security. Sometimes it paints a target on your back. And that day, the bullseye was glowing on mine. As the champagne glasses clinked and executives made small talk about golf and vacation homes in Aspen, I caught a glimpse of my boss across the room. His jaw was tight, his smile forced. He had barely acknowledged me, which wasn't new. For years, he'd treated me like I was just another cog, useful when convenient, invisible otherwise. But now something in his eyes looked different. Calculated, cold. I brushed it off. I didn't want to ruin my moment by overthinking office politics. I was too busy imagining what this deal meant for my career. I thought about the bonus: I might finally get the promotion that was long overdue, maybe even the respect I had been quietly earning for years. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing, because just 3 hours later, while the client's signature ink was still drying, while my inbox was flooding with congratulations emails, while I was literally drafting a press release to celebrate our historic win, I was called into a meeting. A short, sterile one, no champagne this time. Just HR, my boss, and a manila folder with my name on it. They fired me. No explanation that made sense. No acknowledgement of the contract I had just closed. Just cold rehearsed lines about restructuring and shifting priorities. As if I hadn't just secured the deal of a lifetime. As if I hadn't just proven my worth beyond doubt. I walked out of that building with my badge deactivated and my career, at least within those walls, completely over. But as the autumn air hit my face, shock slowly gave way to something sharper. Anger. Clarity. Because here's what they didn't know: the client didn't just trust the company. They trusted me. And if they thought they could toss me aside after I had delivered $200 million into their hands, they were about to learn the hardest lesson in business. Never underestimate the woman you just betrayed. If you looked at my company from the outside, you'd think it was a dream workplace. Sleek office downtown, glossy branding campaigns, executives giving TED Talk-style interviews about empowerment and innovation. They bragged about diversity and inclusion in every press release. But peel back that shiny veneer and the truth was uglier. Inside those glass walls, favoritism wasn't just common, it was policy. Promotions didn't go to the hardest workers. They went to golf buddies, frat brothers, or anyone who knew how to laugh at the right jokes during happy hour. Men who barely showed up to client meetings were fast-tracked to leadership, while women like me, who carried entire projects on our backs, were told to be patient or learn to be more of a team player. I started at that company straight out of grad school, starry-eyed and hungry. I didn't mind being underestimated back then. I thought if I just worked harder, delivered results, no one could deny I'd earn my place. And for a while, I almost convinced myself it was working. But the higher I climbed, the more obvious it became I wasn't on the same ladder. Mine had missing rungs, while theirs was an escalator. I remember one project in particular. A merger deal worth $60 million. I led every negotiation, built trust with both sides, and basically lived out of hotel rooms for 3 months to get it across the finish line. When it closed, the headlines called it a monumental success for the company. My boss. He took the credit at the press conference. I wasn't even invited. When I confronted him about it, he smiled and said, "You're still young. Don't worry, your time will come." That was 3 years ago. My time never came. Not in his eyes. The unspoken truth was this: I was good enough to do the work, good enough to save accounts that others fumbled, but not good enough to be seen. My boss couldn't stand that clients trusted me more than him. He hated that I had relationships he couldn't manufacture with a round of golf. I was a threat to his fragile ego, and instead of lifting me up, he clipped my wings every chance he got. The office culture fed that behavior. The women who spoke up were labeled difficult. The ones who played along were ignored anyway. HR loved to talk about open-door policies, but everyone knew those doors led nowhere. The safest move was silence, and I'd learned to master it, but silence doesn't mean weakness. I kept receipts, emails, notes, patterns of favoritism so blatant they read like a bad script. And I stored them away quietly, methodically, even when I wasn't sure what I'd do with them. Because deep down, I knew something like this was coming. Maybe not the exact scene of being fired the day I signed the biggest contract in company history, but betrayal. That was always in the fine print. So when they blindsided me, when they shoved that manila folder across the table, it hurt, but it didn't surprise me. The only surprise was how far they underestimated me. They thought I'd walk away, quietly humiliated and defeated. But the truth, they had just given me every reason to stop playing by their rules. The betrayal didn't come with fireworks or theatrics. It came with fluorescent lighting, stale coffee, and the too calm voice of HR. The same morning I closed the $200 million deal, I was still riding the high. My inbox was a flood of congratulations, and even the CFO, who usually pretended I didn't exist, had sent me a one-line email, "Nice work." This is huge. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. Maybe they couldn't ignore me anymore. That hope lasted exactly 3 hours. "Can you step into the conference room for a moment?" my boss's assistant asked. Her voice was flat, but her eyes flickered with something pity, maybe. I followed her, confused but not alarmed. Meetings were my life. I could walk into a room blind and improvise my way through negotiations worth millions. But this time, I wasn't walking into a negotiation. I was walking into an ambush. Inside sat my boss HR and a folder with my name typed neatly on the front. My stomach dropped. My boss didn't even look at me when he started. "As you know, the company is going through restructuring," he said, as if he were reciting from a teleprompter. "Unfortunately, your role is being eliminated, effective immediately." I blinked. I thought I had misheard. "Restructuring," I repeated. "I just closed the biggest deal in this company's history today. How does that translate to my role being eliminated?" HR shifted uncomfortably. My boss finally met my eyes, and in his stare, I saw it, the smugness he'd been trying to hide since that morning. He wanted this. He'd been waiting for it. My success had embarrassed him, and instead of rewarding me, he decided to erase me. "You'll receive a severance package," HR said. Pushing the folder toward me like that would soften the blow. "And of course, we expect you to keep this transition professional." Professional. That word burned. They wanted me to smile, shake hands, and vanish quietly, like I hadn't just built the very foundation they were standing on. Like I hadn't earned the trust of a client powerful enough to alter the company's trajectory. I could feel my throat tightening, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You fire me the same day I bring in $200 million. After years of doing the work no one else here could pull off, my boss's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Business is business. And there it was, the line meant to shut me down. But instead of closing me off, it lit a fuse inside me. I took the folder without another word. I didn't beg, I didn't argue. I simply stood up, smoothed my jacket, and walked out. Not because I was defeated, but because in that moment a new clarity washed over me. The contract wasn't with them. Not really. It was with me. The client had made that clear. As I stepped into the elevator, I whispered to myself, business is business. Only this time, it wouldn't be their business. It would be mine. And they had just given me every reason to make sure they regretted underestimating me. Walking out of that office with a cardboard box in my arms felt like the cliché ending to every corporate sob story. But for me, it wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something sharper. I didn't go home and cry into a glass of wine. I went home, cleared my desk at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. My anger was fuel, but my preparation was surgical. If I was going to make a move, it couldn't be emotional. It had to be precise. First, I revisited the contract I had just closed. I knew it inside out. I had written most of the language myself. The ink was barely dry, but what stood out was this: nowhere did it obligate the client to stay with my former company beyond the deliverables. Their trust wasn't with the logo on the letterhead. It was with me, the person who had spent months building the relationship, navigating their concerns, and negotiating terms that worked for both sides. That was my leverage. I spent the next week doing something I'd perfected over years in corporate life, moving silently. No angry LinkedIn posts, no whispered gossip. I let the company think I'd vanished licking my wounds. Meanwhile, I was laying down the bricks of my own foundation. I started with the client. Not directly, not yet. That would have been sloppy. Instead, I replayed every conversation we'd ever had, every offhand comment, every subtle signal. I knew what mattered to them: trust, responsiveness, and not being treated like a checkbook. My old company had never understood that. To them, this client was just a trophy. To me, they were a relationship. Next, I mapped out my resources. Contacts I could trust, former colleagues who had already left the company and weren't bound by loyalty or fear. A lawyer friend who could discreetly review documents. A financial planner who could advise me on how much risk I could afford to take. I worked in silence, but I didn't work alone. At night, while the city outside my apartment buzzed with weekend noise, I drafted what would become my pitch, not just to the client, but to myself. Could I really build something on my own? Could I step into a world where failure wouldn't just be embarrassing? It could ruin me financially. Every doubt whispered in my ear, but underneath it was a louder voice, steady and calm. They already bet against you. What do you have to lose? I knew timing was everything. I couldn't approach the client while the company still had eyes on me. So I waited, bided my time, and watched as the press release about their $200 million win hit the news cycle. My name was nowhere in it, of course. They painted it as a team achievement with my boss grinning in every photo. I clipped the article and pinned it to my wall, not as a wound, but as a reminder. Because while they were busy celebrating my work as their victory, I was quietly preparing the one move they would never see coming. They fired me thinking I was disposable. What they didn't realize was that I had already become indispensable to the very client they now depended on. And soon I'd prove it. The first move had to be subtle. I wasn't about to waltz into the client's office and declare I was free. That would have been reckless. No, the art of revenge in business is patience disguised as confidence. I waited 2 weeks. 2 weeks where my old company paraded around with headlines about the $200 million deal. 2 weeks where they sent carefully worded emails to the client, trying to cement themselves as the heroes of a story I had written. And 2 weeks where, behind the scenes, I prepared my play. Finally, I sent the email. Short, professional, direct. I wanted to personally thank you again for the trust you placed in me during the negotiation process. Although I've recently moved on from the company, I remain committed to ensuring your needs are fully supported. If you'd like to connect, I'd be glad to discuss how I might continue to help you achieve your goals directly. No bitterness, no drama, just confidence. The reply came faster than I expected. When can you come in? I knew right then I had them. The meeting was held at their headquarters in a sleek glass tower that made my old office look like a budget motel. The CEO greeted me personally, just like he had the day we signed. He wasted no time. We signed that contract because of you, he said. Not your boss, not your company. You. If you're telling me there's a way to work with you directly, I'm listening. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. I laid out my vision, a boutique consultancy focused on exactly what they valued most: personalized strategy responsiveness, and a partner who didn't see them as a cash cow. No bloated overhead, no layers of bureaucracy, just me and a lean team. I was already lining up. For a moment, the CEO just leaned back, studying me. Then he smiled. Send me a proposal. We'll amend the deal. That was it. In one meeting, the future tilted in my favor. When my old company found out, the panic was immediate. I could practically hear the shouting in their boardroom from across the city. Their golden contract, the deal they had fired me on the very day it was signed, was slipping through their fingers. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I just kept working methodical and professional, building my new firm around the very client they thought they had stolen from me. And the sweetest part, the client didn't just transfer their business to me, they expanded it. Within 3 months, what had started as a $200 million contract turned into a portfolio of projects worth even more. The CEO told me, point blank, "We trust you. We don't trust them." It was more than revenge, it was validation. They had underestimated me, silenced me, erased me from the story. And yet, here I was, writing the ending they never saw coming. The deal they thought defined their success became the very weapon of their downfall. And I didn't need to raise my voice or slam a door. I just did what I always did, delivered results they couldn't touch. Only this time, it was for myself. In business, revenge doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's quieter, a slow, undeniable shift in power that no press release or spin doctor can cover up. Within months of launching my firm, the ripple effects became impossible to ignore. The client's contract, once the crown jewel of my old company's portfolio, was gone. And when word spread that their most high-profile client had followed me out the door, others started asking questions. Quietly at first, then louder. I didn't have to poach anyone. The truth traveled on its own. Executives in the industry talk, and when they learned that a so-called junior VP had built and closed a $200 million deal, only to be fired the same day they weren't impressed with my old company's restructuring, they were appalled. Talented people began leaving. Some joined me. Some simply refused to stay at a place that punished achievement. And slowly the company that had once strutted on the strength of my work began to fracture from within. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding not just a career, but a life on my own terms. The long nights and endless flights were still there, but this time they weren't for someone else's bonus or someone else's ego. They were for me, my team, and the clients who chose to trust us. Every late-night email, every early morning strategy call felt different now. It wasn't survival, it was ownership. People often ask me if it was worth it, if the risk of walking away from the supposed safety of a big corporation was justified. My answer is always the same: Safety is an illusion when you work for people who don't value you. They can cut you loose the moment you outshine them. That's not stability. That's a trap. Looking back, I sometimes think about the moment in that sterile conference room when they pushed the folder across the table and told me it was over. I remember how small they wanted me to feel, how final they made it sound. And I remember the quiet spark in my chest that whispered, "This isn't the end. This is your opening." That whisper was right. Today, when I walk into meetings with new clients, I no longer carry the weight of being underestimated. I don't have to prove I belong in the room. I built the room. I set the table. And the people who sit across from me know that I deliver not because I have a company's logo behind me, but because my name is enough. As for my old boss, last I heard he retired early. The official story was that he wanted to spend more time with family. The unofficial story, he was pushed out after losing too much business. Either way, I don't waste time thinking about him. Because the best revenge wasn't watching him fall. The best revenge was building something he could never touch, something that was mine. If there's one lesson I carry forward, it's this: never let anyone convince you that your value depends on their permission. They may hold the office, the title, the power for a season. But if you hold your own worth, if you know the relationships you've built and the work you've delivered, you don't just survive betrayal, you turn it into your empire.